Welcome back to the Tribe Alliance podcast, talking about Survivor Branford, episode 4, season 9. It's been a trip. It's been fun. Ryan, happy to have you back. What'd you think about episode 4? Just initial thoughts off the bat without giving too much of your opinion away here.
I loved it as a closing arc to the pre-merge and the Parkside tribe. It you finally it is interesting to always see a tribe get completely demolished, even if it would have maybe been fun to see how the dynamic of the other tribe played out in a tribal situation, which we're never going to get
Sure.
considering they're merging next episode. But overall, it was nice to see the group that came out of this episode and excited for the future and the story that brings out of it, and overall was pretty engaged with this episode and everything that went on, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's get into it. It's a great episode. I think this is my favorite episode, probably outside of the first episode. The first episode I thought was really really cool, especially like first time watching Branford, first time getting to know like a lot of these players. So for me, I always love a first episode of any Survivor season that I'm watching, but this had a lot going on, and there's a lot to kind of break down here. So we're gonna just get into it. Tasha, Tim, and Josh talk about having all four of them stay very strong going into the merge, try to be swing votes for the returnees. So, this tribe, although is broken down into this at this point in the episode, four people, right? You got to use your disadvantages to your advantage, right? This is a game about leverage, a game about a little bit of luck, but it's all about that leverage and what you can make do with what you have. And, they really want to win this immunity challenge going into this immunity challenge because they can set themselves up of if there are groups over there, if they're not a cohesive seven, or even if they are, there's got to be a crack somewhere itching to go to tribal. I mean, you've spent hours with these people and you want to play the game. Like for me, playing Survivor, I love voting. It's part of the game. It's a tough part of the game, but that's what makes it so compelling and so fun to play. And for me, you set yourselves up. If you can go in as a 4, you can really do some damage and use your disadvantages to advantage. And that's what they have going on in their head. And what's your opinion just going into it? Like, if you're on that Parkside tribe, you're looking for those cracks immediately, right? It's like you're trying to win because you haven't and you need to, because tribal council is not a friendly home to be in.
Yeah, I mean, you're really getting desperate. I think once you hit that third tribal last episode, like what, two tribals is a tough streak. Three tribals is, oh god,
Yeah.
we we are getting down to the thin numbers, and this that last episode was a must win, and this one feels like a must win. You can't get it down, and not a must win like your game is over, but a must win in the sense that you're gonna be at a disadvantage in the merge. Like there's no question about it. Not saying that this Parkside tribe is just gonna be pagonged and eliminated one by one, but it's hard to use that leverage, and you automatically just kind of have a story built into your game so far by
Yeah.
managing to survive down to a group of three going into the merge. So I think that's kind of tough to deal with on its own because players already have that credit for you in mind. That's already like a very clear resume point going into the end of the game. Just like in my last season, I felt like there was a slaughter of the new players early on. And that's kind of, in some ways, that's pretty much the same thing this season. But last season, it was a mixed tribe. So it was just kind of how it shook out. This season, it's because the newbies tribe just hasn't won anything. Like
Right. Right.
it's no fault of them strategically. It's just kind of they've been forced to. So that my last season, I felt like that kind of gave the newbies a story that once the one or two that got really far to the end, because the rest of the fellow new players got slaughtered. And this season, it's kind of in the same way that they've been able to outlast the early portion game. I mean, four tribals in a row. Our three survivors have made it out of here. So it's a tough spot. When you hit the fourth tribal, you're like, shit. The game is never going to be not uphill from here. It almost feels like even in your best moments, there's always that story carrying behind you, and it's something you always have to think about now.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing because like a good thing that you bring up there because it's something in the actual game that we see, right? It's like people like Emily Flippin, people that survive these tribals and this really, really nasty pre-merge of like just a dogfight to even get to the merge when everyone else has kind of been sitting pretty, just kind of getting their way, coasting their way to the merge, right? Because they've been winning challenges, didn't have to have that those layers of strategies, those because that requires a different type of processing, a different type of thinking. And it's kind of like Emily is able to run laps and warm up before everyone else has to run the same track meet as her, right? So it's one of those things that you have to consider because in a short game like this, those stories matter as well. And people tend to forget that sometimes because that's a huge argument at the end of 36 hours is the game. You know,
Yeah.
that's a huge argument to be. I was fighting since 8 a.m. this morning, right? Or whatever
Mhm.
morning they're, Saturday morning,
Yeah.
opposed to I didn't even have to go to tribal until the final 10. It's a there's a lot going on with that. And there's a lot that there's cracks to be there because you're also extending that open arm. It's like we have nobody. We have nobody. You guys want to get to the final seven, and that's just boring and ugly, and it's just going to not end well for whoever you're talking to at that moment, right? It's like, let's dice it up. Let's play Survivor. They have a huge argument going in, whoever three make it in if they do lose this immunity challenge that we're going to get to.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we see it. The Survivor meta has come to like understand these things because we've seen winners of the show like Zapia, Chris Daughtery, even like Stephanie LaGrossa, like Denise Stapley, like people that were in those really tough early tribes, like come through and get a lot of credit for their early survival, and that's kind of
Yeah.
something I think that is in most fans of the show's minds is how like these people that came out of impossible situations got the credit they deserve.
Mhm.
And so, um, what was I gonna say? Yeah, like if it's interesting because Branford normally ends in a final three. I believe it has every season, just because of the way the timing works with tribals. So if it does, that means if a member of this veterans tribe wins, they will have only gone to seven tribals, which is really like a small number. So it's interesting, like what kind of stuff you can bring out of your game when you're speaking to seven tribals, and how much is it possible to champion your game over someone that's been to 11 tribals? Like that would be very much in my head. It's maybe a lesser significance in a wider like game pool when you're starting with 18, 20 players and the merge can go a little longer, but when it's only going to be seven tribals, it's I feel for this newbie tribe, it's going to be a tough road ahead. But yeah, to the fault of their own based on this immunity challenge, which I think you'll lead us into. But I would say
Think
I was a little more disappointed in this one than any of the last three, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. We're gonna get into this challenge. It wasn't a great showing for one tribe, and we'll let you know what tribe it is when we get there. But not a great showing. Um, Steve, we see early at the Parkside tribe has a good relationship with everybody on the tribe, so he has like kind of full trust to go out there and kind of look for the idol and maybe see if he can make something happen there. Steve can't find it, can't tell directions. I mean, it's tough. Not a knock on you, Steve. I probably wouldn't have found it either, but it was really funny watching Steve like try to find it because he just couldn't, and it was hilarious.
Digging idols and idols where you have to dig, and I know this from experience because I've like running my own survivors and occasionally hiding an idol somewhere you have to dig. Even if it's not that deep, it's always like when the person's digging, it's kind of like you don't know how deep to dig sometimes. And you don't want to dig too deep in one spot because you might think, oh, that's a waste of time to dig really deep with the host really hide it that deep. But, so then sometimes you counter that too much and you're digging like a little too light. So I kind of understand what the frustration of that tribe. I think it was a really good clue. I think it was a little easier or a little harder this idol to find than the other tribes just because of the digging elements. I think like location wise it was a reasonable clue, but the digging element makes it
Tough.
tricky. And I understand the frustration of the group for finding this one, and I hope they do find it. I'm not sure that I think in the past you haven't been allowed to find an idol past like your pre-merge tribe, so that pre-merge idol might be gone. But also, in my season, I found an idol on the last round of my the tribe before the merge, and they didn't show it until like the next episode. So it might be that sort of situation where it wasn't really relevant to the story beat, and they might not show it till the next episode to keep some drama for the merge boost. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone did find it, but as of now, not looking like it.
Yeah, it's not looking good for the idol for them, but at least they know there's a real one out there, right? Christy went home with that fake one. So let's take it over to the Tyler tribe. Dennis Haley immediately kind of posed the idea of maybe throwing a challenge. So for me, as a player that I mean, I've only played like 2 games, but like the player that I know that I would be if I was playing the game, I'm so for throwing a challenge. And it's a hot take. People hate it. People don't like it. But dude, I'm not out there for like the challenge anyway. So I'm not like that aspect of things. So like I'm not good. I'm not the best. It's not my strong suit. Like so for me, I could probably just throw one and people would just think I'm trying my hardest anyway. But when it comes down to the strategy of it, it can be good. Like imagine if like Deshaun and Danny threw that challenge, like was able and Nasir didn't save it. Like Erica probably goes home and it's a whole different outcome. And it's like you get your target out sometimes with it. It can come back to bite you, but there are risk in this game that some people are willing to take and some people aren't willing to take. And there's that fluctuates with just different types of risks. And that's a risk I'd be willing to take. But ultimately I never thought that they would even go through with it.
I'm very mixed on throwing challenges. I think first of all, from a viewing perspective, it usually turns out bad more than it turns out good. There's some well, that's not true. There's some drama in it, and I disagree. I disagree. I already changed my mind on what I was going to say. I'm still mixed about throwing challenges as a player. I think most of the time it actually does turn out entertaining just because I do think like 50% of the time it does blow up in someone's face to throw
Yeah.
a challenge. That's why I don't love it as a player because even if they do throw this challenge, I mean, they know Pat doesn't likely have the idol. That's all a farce. But what if I don't know, what if something was happening and Pat teamed up with the Michelle team and they vote one of the other three out? Like you don't like maybe Pat hears wind that they're going for this unanimous vote on him, and he hears about that Dennis is targeting him first, so he runs to Michelle. Is like, "Hey, I'm desperate. I won't vote for you," and then it joins them. Like, there's so many ways it can technically go wrong,
But yeah,
and
100%.
even though in theory I wouldn't mind it, but I don't think in this situation it's the right move. I don't know
No,
if you
probably not.
agree, but I don't think I think sometimes I think most of the time throwing when there is the opportunity to throw a challenge, I think it's right for some people on the tribe, but not others. Obviously not the person who's getting booted. But even when it's a unanimous boot, I think like there's people on the tribe that are in a lot more potential danger than others and like to weigh that and get enough people to unite to throw it is interesting and tough to do. But yeah, I think in this situation there there's enough chaos on this tribe despite Pat like being such like a clear boot. He's almost too obvious in a boot in a way that I feel like that could drum up some chaos in itself. So I wouldn't recommend it. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, in this situation, I don't think it would have been smart to intentionally try to throw the challenge, especially when like both groups. I mean, I don't want to say both groups, but the group that I know for sure of Haley, Danny, Michelle, like they want to take out the newbies. They're talking about staying strong. We're seeing these like these two groups that we've been speculating and seeing the whole time. Feels like both sides of the party kind of know what's going on and looks like Pat can be a swing type of vote. But I find it kind of questionable the way that Pat's going about when he's approached about like, being a swing voter. He's like, I don't want to make any big decisions. I don't want to call any shots. It's like, I feel like you just have to like yes man everything when you're that desperate. Like don't push back. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't I'm like back and forth between like how much does Pat realize like the situation he's in. Like it seems
Yeah,
like he says something awful and then he comes off like self-aware and professional, like, yeah, I gotta
exactly.
backtrack. I'm making messes. And then he does something again and then he backtracks. And then it's like, he just needs to put his foot in his mouth a little bit more. And yeah, yeah, well, you're exactly right. He needs to be a yes man in this situation. Just be like he is getting an opportunity given to him, like a golden
Thank you for
opportunity.
saving
Like
me.
like this is the first time we've seen in 4 episodes that like real harder evidence that there's a chance he might survive a tribal on this tribe, and he should just be going, "Yep, yep, yep." Like
Right.
this is exactly what I've needed. I'll do whatever you want, and you got to kiss ass for at least a round or two before you can start being making your own opportunities again. Like that's what it takes to reintegrate your trust with people. Is just play their game. Like you don't always have to be the survivor superstar, like making every move for yourself. You can play someone else's game sometimes. That's okay.
Absolutely.
That's how if you're always playing your game and it's very transparent to other people that you're always playing your game, um, they're not going to work with you because they want to prioritize their game and they're not just going to do everything that revolves around your game when it's really transparent. And that's something I think that's part of the survivor meta that I think I've really you really have to be aware of is how are other people, not just what's best for you, but what do other people think you think is best for you?
Right.
Like what is
Absolutely.
other people's perception of you is more important than what you think is the right thing to do almost.
Oh yeah, 100%. And we see where both sides are kind of like approaching him. And instead of like, I mean, I'm not saying you have to like yes man, like kiss ass to where it's like comes to a point of like fake or just like you're yes manning both sides, but it's like you have an opportunity here to choose a side. You have both sides saying, we want you to be like in this with us in this three. And he's like, I'm not going to promise you anything to both of them. And it's like, that's sus. And like if I hear that, I mean, I played a game once, not gonna name any names, obviously, but it was just like a fun game. And like it was a 2-day game, and like there was a point to where like I walked up to somebody and he just like stopped talking and I was like, yo, you wanna like talk? And he was like, I'm kinda like tired. And then 3 minutes later I see him talking to someone else. Right. So it's like instead of
It's
it's
like
one of those things.
even if it's that's not your intention in a game that's so fueled around paranoia, like both of these groups of three might assume he's with the other group of three, even if
That's
he
gotta be
isn't, and
assumed.
he's just deciding. It has to be assumed because otherwise you have to make some assumptions in Survivor or you're behind the pack because you're never gonna have all the information in a game.
No.
It's
Right.
just there's too many people looking out for themselves. So naturally some assumptions have to be made and sometimes you're gonna be wrong, but if you're not making like assumptions, and this is where Survivor differs from real life because you shouldn't make these assumptions about people, but in Survivor it's that or your life sometimes, and you really gotta recognize that as a player.
Yeah. I mean, so talking about this dynamic of this Tyler tribe, before we get into the immunity challenge, I kind of just want to ask you one thing. Like, do you think when it push comes to shove, like, are the veterans going to stick together once the merge hits, or do you think they're going to break up?
I think they're gonna break up. I really do. I don't. I think I think the Michelle, Danny, Haley side is probably going to initially push for a newbie to go home, and I think Dennis, Brandon, and Sarah are just going to see that's too much of an opportunity not to waste this by voting for a newbie off the bat. For
Yeah.
starters, the newbies will only have three, so it's not like the newbie. If the newbies had like five or so, then maybe you vote one out just to, like dwindle the numbers down like a little, so it's not as even. But even if you vote veteran out, you still have a technically veteran lead, though it might be a little harder to you won't really be able to go back to veteran strong after, so that makes things kind of tricky. There could be a situation where now I think about it, if you vote for a newbie, then or if you vote for like a Michelle, Haley, Danny, right? Then there's two left in that duo. There's the three of Dennis, Sarah, and Brandon, and then there's the three newbies, and then there's Pat as the one, and he can kind of join either the groups of three, or he can join the two, and then that two go with another group of three. So you could see like a variety of situations there. So that makes the game really open. So maybe that's a little dangerous right there. Like, what is Pat going to do if we stick to voting out Michelle, Danny, Haley real early? But you also could think, oh, one of Michelle, Danny, Haley probably has the idol, I'm sure Dennis thinks. So in that case, maybe this is a time to jump on one of them and maybe blindside someone who isn't expecting to play the idol this early. So there's risk and reward for what choice they make with this, I think, and I lean towards them making the move, especially because I hope so, because I think it will make this game really open, and I
Mhm.
don't think it would be as simple as like one of the veteran sides all getting wiped out. Like, I think if one veteran side gets one out, then the game jumps around more. So that's what I'm really looking for. But is it going to happen?
One way to find
I'm
out,
not as
tune in to
I'm
Survivor
not as sure.
Branford.
Yeah, I'm
One way to
ready
find out,
to.
Saturday mornings. They're
Saturday mornings.
dropping them hot. And
So
they're
I've
dropping
heard.
hot like these tiles. They're doing these we getting this immunity challenge. Not a good one for who do you think? Ding. Parkside.
Um, yeah, I mean, wow, after episodes of Josh like really feeling bad about his challenge performance, and I've been saying like I think he maybe hasn't been great, but I don't think he's been awful. Yeah, this one he really dropped the bar, and I dropped the ball, excuse me, and I think well maybe he dropped the tiles or didn't drop them in the right places. I mean
Go
Steven has a little meltdown where he's really frustrated with that they were telling him to flip the tiles and then they come back and they weren't flipped. And it's a tough challenge because when you're making your moves like carrying stuff, like you can't communicate while you're doing that part of the challenge. So when you come back, you only have that short period to make that communication. And if you're not following directions here and there, then it's not gonna happen. I don't know like to what I don't know to what extent the communication was perfect. I feel like it was outlined. It was a little tricky to follow, like exactly what they were saying, but it did seem like from the way it was presented that this one was indeed like on Josh. I mean, again, like I'm not saying it's perfectly like a sure thing that they would have won. Like the Veterans Tribe again did pretty well with this puzzle, but like for a tribe that's been like hoping for the puzzle over and over and over, they finally got their damn puzzle, and again we're just wiped out. Like never had a chance this tribe, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, and it's sad to see, but it's it's the game. And before we get out of this immunity challenge, like Pat, challenge beast, man coming up with the strategy. I mean, they're like, is he a threat now? I'm like, come on, I don't know about all that. I mean, Pat's a threat in his own kind because of what he can do. Is like there's a multitude of ways to be a threat in a game. Everyone's a threat. It's just for how big of a threat, and is this the threat relevant to my game as a real serious threat? But I don't know, man. That was some nice strategy. Got the. It seemed like they wiped him out, like you said. I mean, it wasn't even close. I mean, I don't even know what Josh was doing there. I love Josh, but I've had a moment where I was supposed to throw balls and it didn't go well. So it happens to everybody, but we're gonna see that it's gonna be someone's demise on this tribe. But yeah, it was just not the best showing.
Yeah, credit to Pat. I mean, we've it's been tough. Like I feel like we've been very negative on him just because of the way it's been presented so far, and his challenge like leadership has definitely been a highlight, like a pro highlight of his experience so far, and that's been great to see. Like at least he's doing well to keep his own ass out of tribal and of these bad scenarios. So good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So we get back to this Tyler tribe. And I think it's interesting that Dennis is starting to become more like weary of Danny and thinking that Danny has the idol because of how adamant that Danny thinks that Pat might have this like actual idol here because he might be trying to deflect the story, whatever it may be. I mean, do you think that that means anything at all? Like, do you think that like because obviously, it has to mean something because if Dennis tells Sarah and Brandon that he's really adamant, they really just focus it on Danny, and then it ends up just being this whole mess. If they do have to end up voting for each other and wanting to know where the idol is, I don't know. I mean, he went from Michelle to Danny. It's like I feel like he's got to land on someone and stick with it, and really just like try to really figure out what like using concrete evidence because I feel like the way I don't know, just not making sense to me right there.
Yeah, I think like the overall target for that three, if they do make an attack on the Michelle, Haley, Danny trio, hasn't really been determined yet. I think
Exactly.
circumstances of the merge, if that is a target, will really, and maybe what the newbies and Pat think about the situation. I mean, I guess we kind of know what Pat thinks about the situation. He wants Michelle gone, but other than that, like it's interesting to see where they'll land on because yeah, it has kind of changed to be like, oh, I don't trust Michelle, I don't trust Danny. Oh, maybe Haley's kind of like, and then Haley, I think, is kind of like a safer bet if you're scared about like idols and stuff, which is interesting to me. I think I don't know where their heads are at. I think just not having a tribal yet and not having like true strategic like dynamics and like I think you can't truly get your reads on people until like push comes to shove and you're dealing with the vote. So I think that's made it hard and is why they're kind of wavering in what they're actually thinking about going forward because they haven't seen any of the players on their tribe in action yet this season. That's where they really put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we get to the Parkside tribe. They got to break up. They got to turn on one another. The main, I think that, the episode's kind of setting up is, is the Park Tri Alliance going to turn on Tim and just vote Tim out? Or is Tim going to take Josh's spot in the Park Tri and vote Josh out because of just, the bad challenge performance? And, I think ultimately they're starting to just feel better with Tim at this spot too. Um, because I think just I don't know. I think what you said last episode was Josh had a really good first episode and it kind of just fizzled out. And I think that's kind of
Yeah,
what we're seeing here is because I just feel like he's kind of falling apart in this episode a bit. And I hated to see it because I'm a big Josh fan. I'm a big fan of all these people, by the way. I have no
yeah.
business critiquing any of your gameplay, but this is what we have to do. And this is what we're here to do. And we're viewers watching it, but just so you guys know, it's all in fun love. And it's been a great season so far. But yeah, about Josh here, about kind of just maybe just fizzling out there and just kind of, I don't want to say he's giving up or anything at all, but it's more of like, a couple bad challenge performances, being so and so, maybe the weakest link on that tribe. It's like, what else do you do in that situation? You have to kind of, we saved you twice.
Yeah, I mean, coming out, like you said, coming out of the first episode, I mean, I think I put Tasha as my like best contender from that tribe. Between Steven and Josh, I might put Josh as my second. It's just because Josh really was in a very like chill spot. And obviously, if they had won any of these last four challenges, he would be making the merge here. So I think that's really speaks to where he set himself up in the first episode. But I think the other people on this tribe, like well, Tim, Tasha, Steven, the three that are left, have really kind of noticed not only like his challenge ability, which I'm sure is maybe a little bit in their heads still, because they technically might not merge next episode. Like they could merge at 9 because they're at 10 next episode. So even though we saw in the preview that they are merging, that's not something you 100% know. So like going into another challenge with Josh is tough, but also like just the way Josh after the initial episode has handled like the dynamic with the girls, where Tasha and Tim, especially, we have seen like feeling things out with them, and Steven, we've seen be like a core leader in like the split vote and like balancing the dynamic there. Josh has kind of been sitting back and just being like, yes, we're doing this, you guys are good, I agree, and just hasn't really taken like a narrative of his own in the past two episodes. And I think I I don't know. I feel like there's something to that. I can't really describe it. Like, I'm interested to see why you think Tim overtook Josh in these last two episodes. Do you think it's just a social thing where they realized after a while, "Oh, we're really good with Tim and stuff," or do you think it was purely challenge based and worried about another challenge? Because I mean, if you think you're merging, like you you're not worried about Josh because he's not going to win
He's a strong
maybe
ally.
immunity challenges necessarily. I mean, he might, 'cause individual's a lot different than challenges so far, but you kind of assume the trend continues maybe in your head, even if it doesn't always. But what do you think of the way Tim has slowly kind of overtook Josh's place in the park trio these past few episodes?
Well, for me, it becomes one of those things where I think that Tim had to have taken over Josh's spot in Steven and Tasha's circle of trust there. It's like that he took that spot by being a strong ally and performing well in challenges, right? Keeping them in at least, right? And it could have just been a social thing, like you said as well. But I'm looking at the other side of it too, because if I think that we're merging, I probably axed him there because I'm like, hey, thanks for being a part of the ride, been a great ally, but like Josh is way more predictable, and
Mm.
I think Josh is a very strong ally when push comes to shove in the voting booth. I don't think Josh was ever going to write down Steven or Tasha's name ever. So
Yeah, it's kind of a balance when you have someone like Tim coming to merge with you. I think he's a little more likely to gain allies for you and help you get out of it, but he's also more likely to, if you guys get in a tight spot, outplay you and send you
exactly,
packing instead of him when push comes to shove.
it's a threat.
So so yeah, he is a threat. And so that's kind of what you have to weigh in your mind too, is it worth like the skill the just because on paper I feel like I'm a little more scared of Tim than Josh coming out of it. I feel like Josh, while he had very good instincts for this game to me, I think similar to Christy and Victoria, he comes off a little fresher to Survivor. Maybe not totally fresh. I feel like the other two maybe a little more, but but maybe a little less experience. I mean, I know personally just from knowing Tim a little that he is a little more experienced with Survivor. He is someone that took part in my college Survivor. Not that I didn't host him, but he took part like later after I graduated. So he's a little more familiar with this live game aspect. So that can be dangerous, and
Yeah.
you definitely got to weigh that versus what you know with Josh, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting. We got to talk about this before tribal. Josh talks to Tim to see if they kind of want to tie the vote and like maybe take like Tosh out. And then they talk about like he talks about fire, even though it wouldn't go to fire in that situation. It would go to like a revote and then a rock draw, essentially. But still, I mean, Tim obviously is going to tell Tosh the plan, kind of backfires in Josh's fate, kind of the nail in the coffin there, even though I don't think at this point that it was going to be Tim, anyway. I think it was always going to be Josh. I think at that point that Tim just took that spot in the alliance, and that's just is what it is. I think him and Tasha, but I think Steven has to be careful because if I'm
Mm,
Steven, I probably want to keep Josh because if I'm Steven, I can build the allies. Josh is a solid number. I'd be threatened by Tim in a sense because Tim and Tasha are getting very close. And
mm,
that's concerning because Steven and Tasha are supposed to be 1 and 2. And if Tim and Tasha become 1 and 2 and she decides like to turn on Steven, like, because if there's someone that they want to go after, like you said last episode on that tribe, it might be Steven for those reasons because they are bigger shields. They might stick closer together because they know they are these big threats. And that could be pretty concerning for Steve going forward.
I completely agree, and I think this is the biggest slight on Steven's game I've seen so far. Not a significant one, but definitely like I agree. Like what he had a bigger balance in the three. It seemed like with him, Josh, Tasha, than he does with him, Tim, Tasha. I do. It's hard to tell, but I do still feel like we've seen more of like that Tim Tasha dynamic than that Tim Steven dynamic, even though they've had these small moments together. Like Tim Tasha like bonded so much over like the decisions they had to weigh, like whether they were gonna work with Christy and Victoria. Like they had a lot of like you have those small strategic moments where you're working through like what is the right decision, even if ultimately like it didn't come to anything or them making any switching choices. Like just being able to work through that with an ally really bonds you together because you understand that like you can like maturely come to like a strategic consensus. So
Yeah,
I feel like I'm not like positive that who like the number ones are there, but I do feel like overall Steven was in a better position with that other three than he is with Tim
hmm
and Tasha because I do think ultimately Tim is a little more like we've said looking out for himself, whereas Josh
team player.
not that I think he wouldn't like go for it when push comes to shove, but he is more of a team player. I agree.
Yeah,
Which has its values and has been very successful even as recent as
absolutely.
2 seasons ago in Survivor Branford. I would call the winner of
Yeah,
that season a very much a team player, and sometimes that's what it takes to win. But in this case, I don't know that it'll matter for Steven, and I also don't think it was an awful choice. And there's more factors at play than you can even convey in an episode. But yeah, definitely something that I noticed and was thinking about.
yeah. So we get into this tribal council, a familiar place, a familiar home for our Parkside tribe. Probably the last time they're going to go as a tribe. Jim tries to inspire Parkside with a story about tribe in season two, maybe that merged down like 6-2, and the final two members were the people that were in that minority group. So trying to spread some inspo here that it's not the end of the world and that you got to keep fighting. This game's about fight, and always love when they sprinkle some things in like that because as a viewer I didn't even know, so now it makes me even want to kind of check out that season two. So stuff like that's always cool. Steve, Tasha talk about how there are some unresolved issues on the other tribe, which has been relayed by Sarah being an ambassador here, talking about her three being honest, wanting Tasha and whoever Tasha's with to kind of go forward with them. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, and at tribal, Tim puts up his vote and says it's a hard one emotionally, but not one strategically. Josh gets voted out 3-1, and we say goodbye to Sweet Prince Josh because I think Josh is a gem. If I was out there, I would have loved to work with Josh. Josh is a strong ally. He's got your back, and he's a smart guy. And I wish him nothing but the best at Ponderosa while we wait for some new episodes. So, what do you think of that tribal? Did you kind of expect it to kind of go 3-1 there? Obviously, right?
Yeah, it was gonna be 3-1 on Tim or Josh. There was no way it was gonna tie. I mean,
Oh,
Tasha and Tim were gonna come to some sort of consensus between or not Tasha and Tim, Tasha and Steven were gonna come to some sort of consensus between the two of them. And um, I think there were some considerations there, which maybe lends uh like clarity to them being a little tighter than either with Tim ultimately. But yeah, 3-1. I'm not like blindsided by the decision. I could have seen them voting Tim, but it did feel like the last two episodes things were trending away from the Park Trio and Park Try. I keep wanting to say Park Trio, but I think it's Park Try.
yeah, it's
Park
Park
Trio
Trial.
just Park Trio just makes more sense to me. I'm sorry. I like Park.
Does and it flows better, I think. Park Trial,
Yeah,
it's easy. It's like less syllables, but it doesn't sound
it,
weird. Not a knock,
it's
whatever. But
a
it's like
little abrupt.
yes,
Like I like that O at the end.
yeah, Park Trio. I like that too.
But yeah, I'm not shocked by the ending, but it was definitely sad because yeah, it's tough when you get down in a group and you see this with any tribe on Survivor that loses a lot pre-merge. Like there are just players that you never expected to really put your vote down for this early in the game, because ultimately, like, there's going to be in a group of 8 or a group of 7, there's naturally going to be at least 2 or 3 people you click with. So once you get down to have to vote out people you click with, like those are sometimes people you would have taken to final 6, final 5 if you could have, and that you're having to make this decision to vote them out final 11, like that sucks. And I definitely feel for everyone. I feel for Josh a little. He definitely seemed like felt a little more a little confident in this. I think this was a blindside a bit, not a total blindside, but I think he felt good that like his 3 that he's had since the beginning was going to stick through here. So that's tough to kind of be like, oh, I got one over on me. So that's a tough ending, a little bittersweet. But seems like a good guy that kind of understands, and I think he was admittedly, understandably frustrated with his own challenge performance, self-aware of that throughout the game. So good on Josh. I wouldn't mind seeing more of Josh in the future and see how he adapts to like what he's seen from himself in this game and how it went. And I think he has potential to succeed in the future with some adjustments. But yeah, I think a good closing for this pre-merge and this tribe as a whole. And now we have our final 3 of the Parkside tribe. Their our own little final 3, our pre-merge final 3. It's like
Yeah.
they played their own little Survivor merge game of their own, and now they got to do it all again.
Who's your jury vote go to if that's the final 3?
If that's the final 3 of the game they've played so far, I gotta say it's Tasha. I think Steven has we I think we hyped up Steven in the last episode because I think you don't want to be the winner of that pre-merge portion going into the merge. But I think Tasha has just had the most sway over all of the 4 votes, whereas Tim had a good recovery of the first vote, but was just in a bad spot there, where he played too fast. Um, Steven's been more even keel throughout and had some good moments, but nothing like tip top. Maybe like his role in the split vote, and Tasha has just been the one like involved in the shots at every moment and involved in like the balance of decisions and letting the decision go her way with the girls. Like it definitely seemed like she could have gone with the girls and Tim if they so wanted, and I felt like she had the most sway and ability to have sway there. And even the people that came to the tribe, like Brandon, seemed to feel like people thought she was calling the shots. So yeah, um, I got to give it to Tasha so far, but we'll have to see how that translates into our merge game. And obviously, of the 3 left, I think they've all done really well, and I can't
Yeah.
really hate on any of their games too much right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's gonna be it for episode 4 of Survivor Branford. We're gonna get into it all next week. We see that they're gonna merge. We see that they dropped their buffs. They're all vets now. The castaways are gonna play a lottery that no one wants to win. Curious to see what that is, but I'm looking forward to it. Ryan, thank you again for coming on the pod. I'm excited to recap the future episodes with you, and yeah, man, let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And thank you, everyone that's been watching. It's fun to talk about, and glad a few of you are listening. So thanks again, and looking forward to this merge episode, see where this season goes from here. And let us know in the comments if there's ever anything that we're missing consistently, like of our approach to these episodes that you want us to talk about, or something you want me to give insight about that I know about the game, or that like I know about Branford specifically. I'm always interested in letting you guys know, or changing up what we've been talking about. But yeah, looking for the next one. Thanks, Pat.
And that's going to be it for season 9, Survivor Branford, episode 4. We will see you all next week for the merge episode of Survivor Branford.